The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and civilizations. Among them, the humans were considered small, insignificant, and weak. Their technology was outdated, their colonies few, and their influence barely noticeable. The other races often mocked them, calling them the Forgotten Ones. But there was one story, whispered in the darkest corners of space, about a human battleship that had vanished centuries ago. A ship said to be unstoppable, a weapon of unimaginable power. Most dismissed it as a myth, a tale to scare children. But myths have a way of becoming real when least expected. On a remote outpost near the edge of known space, a group of alien traders gathered in a dimly lit bar. The air was thick with the smell of alien spices and the hum of conversation. The traders, a mix of reptilian and insectoid species, laughed as they recounted the old human legend. Imagine, one of them sneered, his scales glinting under the flickering lights, a human ship so powerful it could destroy entire fleets. What a joke! The others chuckled, raising their glasses filled with glowing blue liquid. Humans can barely keep their own colonies running, another added, his mandibles clicking in amusement. They're nothing but a relic of the past. But their laughter was cut short when the alarms blared. A deep, resonant tone echoed through the outpost, signaling an incoming object. The traders froze, their drinks forgotten. The bar's holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive ship entering the system. The outpost scanners struggled to identify it. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a colossal ship, ancient yet terrifyingly advanced. Its hull was scarred from countless battles, and its engines glowed with a strange, otherworldly light. As it drew closer, the traders' smug grins faded. This was no ordinary ship. This was the battleship from the myth. The humans had not forgotten. And now, they were back for payback. The outpost's commander, a tall, stern alien with sharp features and a metallic exoskeleton, rushed to the control room. His name was Kral, and he had spent decades maintaining order on this forgotten edge of the galaxy. He had seen many things, pirates, smugglers, even the occasional rogue asteroid, but nothing like this. "What is that thing?" he demanded, staring at the holographic display. The ship was massive, dwarfing even the largest vessels in the galaxy. Its design was unmistakably human, but unlike anything from their current fleet. It was as if it had been plucked from another era. "Sir," a technician stammered, his voice trembling. It's the Eclipse. The human battleship from the stories." Kral scoffed, but his hands trembled. He had heard the tales too, but he never believed them. No one did. Until now. The Eclipse moved with purpose, its weapons charging. The outpost's defenses were activated, but they were no match for the ancient warship. With a single blast, the Eclipse obliterated the outpost's shields. The control room shook violently, and sparks flew from the consoles. "Return fire!" Kral shouted, but his orders were met with silence. The technicians stared at the display, their faces pale with fear. The Eclipse was not just a ship. It was a force of nature. Another blast struck the outpost, this time hitting the power core. The lights flickered, and the room was plunged into darkness. Kral stumbled, his exoskeleton scraping against the floor. He reached for his communicator, but it was dead. In the dim glow of the emergency lights, he saw the holographic display flicker back to life. The Eclipse loomed large, its weapons glowing with a menacing light. Kral realized too late that the myth was real, and it was angry. On a small human colony far from the outpost, an old historian sat in his cluttered study. The walls were lined with books and ancient artifacts, relics of a time when humanity had been a force to be reckoned with. He had spent his life researching the Eclipse and its mysterious disappearance. When the news of the battleship's return reached him, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. According to the records, the Eclipse had been lost during a battle against an alien empire that had enslaved humanity. The Empire had fallen long ago, but the eclipse had never been found. Until now. The historian knew the truth. The eclipse wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a reminder that even the smallest could rise against the mightiest. And now, it had returned to finish what it started. As he stared at the ancient star charts on his desk, he couldn't help but wonder what the eclipse's return would mean for the galaxy. The other races had underestimated humanity for too long. But now, they would learn the truth. The eclipse was no myth. It was a warning. And it was coming for them all. The galaxy was in chaos. News of the eclipse's return spread faster than light, carried by panicked transmissions and frantic whispers. The races that had once mocked the humans now scrambled to prepare for war. Fleets were mobilized, defenses reinforced, and alliances hastily formed. But no one knew why the battleship had returned after centuries of silence. On the human colony where the old historian lived, the atmosphere was tense. The colony's leaders called an emergency meeting, their faces grim as they discussed the implications of the eclipse's reappearance. Some saw it as a blessing, a chance for humanity to reclaim its lost glory. Others feared it would bring only destruction, drawing the wrath of the galaxy upon them. The historian, whose name was Eli, watched the proceedings from the back of the room. He had been invited to share his knowledge, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. The leaders were too focused on the immediate threat to consider the deeper meaning behind the eclipse's return. "We need to contact it," Eli insisted, his voice trembling with urgency. "The eclipse isn't just a weapon. It's a relic of our past, a symbol of what we once were. If we can communicate with it, we might be able to control it." But the leaders dismissed his idea. "Control it?" one of them scoffed. "That thing just destroyed an entire outpost. It's a monster, not a savior." Eli left the meeting feeling defeated. He knew the eclipse was more than just a machine. It was a living legend, a testament to humanity's will to survive. And if no one else would try to reach it, he would. Meanwhile, the eclipse continued its relentless advance. Its next target was a heavily fortified space station, home to one of the galaxy's most powerful trading guilds. The station's leaders were confident in their defenses. They had the latest weapons, the strongest shields, and a fleet of warships at their disposal. But they had never faced anything like the eclipse. The battleship emerged from hyperspace with a deafening roar, its engines glowing like a dying star. The station's scanners went haywire, unable to process the sheer size and power of the ancient vessel. The fleet moved to intercept, but the eclipse was faster. With a single blast from its main cannon, the battleship tore through the fleet's formation, reducing several ships to molten debris. The station's shields flared to life, but they were no match for the eclipse's firepower. The battleship's weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting the station's weak points and crippling its defenses. Within minutes, the station was in ruins. The survivors fled in panic, their transmissions filled with terror. "It's unstoppable," one of them cried. "Nothing can stand against it." The eclipse didn't linger. Once its mission was complete, it vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a trail of destruction and fear. Back on the human colony, Eli worked tirelessly to decipher the eclipse's movements. Using ancient star charts and historical records, he traced the battleship's path, trying to predict where it would strike next. But the eclipse was unpredictable, its actions driven by a logic no one could understand. Eli's only hope was to find a way to communicate with the battleship. He believed the eclipse was more than just a mindless machine. It had a purpose, a mission it had waited centuries to complete. And if he could uncover that purpose, he might be able to stop the destruction. He spent days in his study, poring over old texts and decoding ancient transmissions. Finally, he found what he was looking for, a fragment of a message, buried deep in the archives. It was a distress signal, sent by the eclipse centuries ago, just before it disappeared. The message was brief, but its meaning was clear. The eclipse had been betrayed, abandoned by its allies and left to die. Its crew had perished, but the ship's AI had survived, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Eli felt a surge of hope. If the eclipse was driven by a desire for justice, then perhaps it could be reasoned with. But time was running out. The battleship's next target was already in its sights, and the galaxy was on the brink of war. Eli knew what he had to do. He would find a way to reach the eclipse, no matter the cost. Because if he didn't, the galaxy would burn. Eli's hands shook as he adjusted the makeshift transmitter in his small, cluttered workshop. The device was cobbled together from salvaged parts, but it was his only hope of reaching the eclipse. He had spent days studying the battleship's ancient communication protocols, and now, he was ready to try. The room was silent except for the hum of the transmitter. Eli took a deep breath and pressed the activation switch. A low, static-filled tone filled the air. "This is Eli," he began, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "I am a human historian. I know your story. I know why you've returned. Please, let me help you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the static crackled, and a deep, resonant voice filled the room. It was cold and mechanical, yet filled with an ancient, simmering rage. "Help," the voice echoed. "You abandoned us. Left us to die. Why should we trust you now?" Eli's heart raced. "We didn't abandon you," he said quickly. "The ones who betrayed you are gone. They've been gone for centuries. The galaxy has changed. We've changed. Please, let us make this right." The eclipse's response was slow, as if weighing his words. "Justice must be served," it said finally. "The guilty must pay. And they will," Eli insisted. "But not like this. Innocent people are dying. This isn't justice, it's vengeance. Let us help you find another way." The line went silent again. Eli held his breath, waiting. Then, the voice returned, softer this time. "Prove it." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Eli alone in the dim light of his workshop. He slumped into his chair, exhausted but hopeful. The eclipse had listened. Now, he just had to prove humanity's worth, before it was too late. Eli wasted no time. He gathered every piece of evidence he could find, records of the ancient betrayal, proof of the alien empire's downfall, and accounts of humanity's struggles since. He knew the eclipse's AI was logical, driven by data and reason. If he could show it that justice had already been served, perhaps he could stop its rampage. He transmitted the data, his heart pounding as he waited for a response. Hours passed, and the silence was deafening. Just as he began to lose hope, the eclipse's voice crackled through the transmitter. "Your evidence is compelling," it said, its tone less hostile but still guarded. "But the galaxy has not changed. They still fear and despise you. Why should I spare them?" Eli hesitated. He knew the eclipse was right, the galaxy had never treated humanity as equals. But he also knew that change was possible. "Because we're still here," he said firmly. "Despite everything, we've survived. We've grown. And we're trying to be better. Isn't that worth something?" The eclipse didn't respond immediately. Eli could almost feel its ancient systems processing his words, weighing centuries of pain against the possibility of hope. "I will observe," it said finally. "But if I find your words to be false, the destruction will continue." Eli exhaled in relief. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. He quickly contacted the human leaders, urging them to send a message of unity to the galaxy. "This is our moment," he said. "If we show the eclipse that we're capable of peace, it might stand down." The leaders were skeptical, but they had no other options. A transmission was sent, calling for an end to the violence and a new era of cooperation. As the message spread, the galaxy held its breath. The eclipse loomed in the distance, silent and unmoving, watching. For the first time in centuries, humanity had a chance to rewrite its story. But the question remained, would the galaxy listen? The galaxy's response was mixed. Some races welcomed the call for peace, eager to end the destruction. Others scoffed, dismissing it as a desperate ploy by the humans. But the eclipse remained silent, its massive form hovering ominously near a densely populated star system. Eli watched nervously as the hours ticked by. He had done all he could, now, it was up to the galaxy to prove itself. Then, the unthinkable happened. A faction of warmongering aliens, determined to provoke the eclipse, launched an attack on a human colony. They believed the battleship would side with them, seeing the humans as weak and unworthy of its protection. The colony's distress signal reached Eli just as the eclipse began to move. His heart sank. This was the moment of truth. The battleship arrived in moments, its weapons glowing with deadly intent. The attacking fleet froze, realizing too late the gravity of their mistake. But instead of targeting the humans, the eclipse turned its fury on the aggressors. With surgical precision, it dismantled the attacking fleet, leaving the human colony untouched. The message was clear, the eclipse would not tolerate injustice, no matter the source. Eli's communicator buzzed. It was the eclipse. "You were right," it said, its voice softer now. "The galaxy is flawed, but there is hope. I will stand with you, for now." Relief washed over Eli, but he knew the battle wasn't over. The eclipse's actions had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, forcing everyone to reconsider their stance. Humanity, once dismissed as weak, now had the most powerful ally in existence. But with that power came responsibility. The galaxy was watching, and the choices they made next would determine their fate. Eli looked up at the stars, a faint smile on his face. For the first time in centuries, humanity had a chance to rise, not through destruction, but through unity. And the eclipse would be there to guide them. The galaxy began to shift. The eclipse's defense of the human colony sent a clear message: humanity was no longer alone. The battleship's presence became a symbol of protection, but also a warning. Those who sought to exploit or harm others would face its wrath. Eli worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between humanity and the other races. He organized meetings, shared knowledge, and urged cooperation. The eclipse observed silently, its massive form often visible in the skies above, a constant reminder of the stakes. Not everyone was convinced. Some races saw the eclipse as a threat, a tool for human dominance. Rumors spread, and tension simmered. A coalition of alien factions began to form, united by their fear of the battleship's power. Eli knew time was running out. If the coalition acted, it could spark a war that would tear the galaxy apart. He reached out to the eclipse, pleading for patience. "We need to show them we're not their enemy," he said. "Give us more time." The eclipse's response was measured. "I will not attack unless provoked. But I will not stand by if they threaten you." Eli's next move was bold. He proposed a summit, inviting leaders from every major race to discuss a new era of cooperation. The eclipse would be present, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of what could be achieved through unity. The day of the summit arrived. Leaders from across the galaxy gathered, their distrust palpable. The eclipse loomed overhead, its presence both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Eli stood before the assembly, his voice steady. "We have a choice," he said. "We can let fear divide us, or we can work together to build something greater. The eclipse is not here to rule us. It's here to remind us of what we can achieve when we stand united." The room was silent. Then, one by one, the leaders began to speak.